When Singapore's most valuable company lost 90% of its worth in less than 2 years, the world watched a titan unravel. Sea Limited soared from obscurity to a $350 billion empire, and then collapsed almost overnight. How did Forrest Li, an untested founder with only gaming experience, build and lose it all? The answer begins with a single conversation that changed the fate of Southeast Asian business forever. Forrest Li arrived in Singapore with little more than a dream and a mountain of student debt. Born in Tianjin, China, he had already bounced between corporate jobs and failed startups, but something about Southeast Asia's energy pulled him in. He rented a single room in public housing, pored over business plans late into the night, and watched as the region's internet economy took its first steps. In 2009, with barely enough capital to cover rent and a handful of like-minded friends, he launched Garena from a cramped shop house. It wasn't glamorous. The office was small, the hours long, and the market for online gaming in Southeast Asia was still unproven. Yet Garena quickly found its footing, striking a deal with Riot Games in 2010 to publish League of Legends across the region. That partnership brought in the first real revenue, and soon Garena became the largest gaming platform in Southeast Asia. The cash from gaming didn't just pay the bills, it fueled an ambition that stretched far beyond leaderboards and tournaments. Even as Garena's user base multiplied and the company's name began to circulate among tech investors, Forrest Li kept thinking bigger. He believed Southeast Asia was ready for something more than games, a company that could serve hundreds of millions, not just with entertainment, but with something essential to daily life. The profits from Garena would become the engine for that vision. What began as a modest gaming distributor was quietly transforming into a cash machine, setting the stage for a leap that few around him could imagine. In 2015, Garena was thriving, but Forrest Li saw cracks in the future. Southeast Asia's gaming market was growing, yet he knew the region's digital landscape was about to change. He watched how Alibaba's Taobao had redefined shopping in China, how entire families from students to grandparents now bought everything from their phones. Having lived through China's e-commerce revolution, Li recognized the same hunger for convenience in Singapore and its neighbors. But Shopee's birth was anything but obvious. The region already had well-funded rivals, Tokopedia and Bukalapak in Indonesia, Carousel in Singapore, and Lazada with Alibaba's billions and a 5-year head start. Most saw the market as locked up. Li had no e-commerce experience, no logistics network, and no clear advantage except for his conviction that the next great consumer company would not come from Silicon Valley or Hangzhou, but from someone who understood Southeast Asia's complexity firsthand. At home, Li's family life reflected this cultural mix. He often spoke of wanting to build something that would matter to his children, a business that would shape the future of their generation, not just his own. In interviews, he has described the responsibility he felt to serve hundreds of millions, not just gamers, but families and small business owners across the region. That sense of mission pushed him to take the kind of risk others called reckless. The decision was made. Garena's resources would fund a new bet. In 2015, Shopee launched as a mobile-first marketplace, not because the timing was perfect, but because Li believed Southeast Asia was ready for its own version of Taobao, one built for local shoppers, in their languages, on their phones. The gamble would force the company to rewrite everything it knew about business and about itself. Forrest Li's decision to launch Shopee was more than a foray into unfamiliar territory. It was a deliberate, high-stakes bet with real consequences. The company's entire financial engine, built on years of gaming profits from Garena, was redirected to fund this new ambition. Every dollar earned from League of Legends tournaments and Free Fire downloads was now fueling an e-commerce experiment that many believed had little chance of survival. Sea Limited's cash flow, once steady and predictable, became the lifeline for a business with no guarantee of success. For Li, this was not a side project, it was a full commitment. He approved the reallocation of Garena's profits into Shopee's technology, marketing, and early seller subsidies, knowing that failure would jeopardize the entire company's future. The risk was clear. If Shopee burned too much capital without gaining traction, the gaming business would not be able to cover the losses indefinitely. There was no outside safety net. Venture capital was limited, and public markets were still years away. Internally, some questioned whether it was wise to stake everything on a crowded e-commerce market dominated by entrenched players with deeper pockets. But Lee pressed forward, convinced that Southeast Asia's digital future would be decided by those willing to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term dominance. His willingness to put Garena's hard-won profits on the line set a tone of resolve across the company. Shopee's launch was not just a new business, it was a calculated gamble that would define C's destiny. Shopee's early playbook was not built on luck or imitation. The team, led by product managers who had seen the limits of web-based commerce, made a decision that set them apart from the start. They built Shopee as a mobile-first platform. In 2015, most Southeast Asian shoppers did not own a desktop computer, but nearly everyone had a smartphone. While rivals like Lazada and Tokopedia were still optimizing clunky websites, Shopee engineers focused on lightweight apps, push notifications, and an interface designed for small screens. This was not just a technical choice, it was a bet on how people would live and shop in the region for years to come. The next move was just as radical. Instead of holding inventory or running warehouses, Shopee launched as a pure marketplace. Sellers listed their products, set their own prices, and handled fulfillment, while Shopee provided the digital infrastructure and payment protection. This asset-light model allowed Shopee to expand rapidly across Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and beyond, without sinking capital into stock or logistics. The marketplace approach also meant Shopee could subsidize both buyers and sellers, using Garena's gaming profits to fund discounts and free shipping, critical levers in price-sensitive markets. But speed and scale alone were not enough. Shopee's category leads poured over data and saw a clear pattern. A few product categories drove the majority of repeat purchases and engagement. Women's fashion, beauty, and accessories, items with high turnover and social appeal, became the engine for growth. Instead of trying to be everything for everyone, Shopee concentrated incentives and marketing on these high-frequency categories, following the classic 80-20 rule. By focusing on the segments that mattered most, they built a habit loop. Shoppers opened the app daily, not just for deals, but for discovery and community. Category focus created the daily habit. These three levers, mobile first, marketplace, and category discipline, created a flywheel effect. Every new seller and buyer added more value to the platform. Shopee's user experience, shaped by local consumer behavior and relentless iteration, began to outpace the competition. The mechanics of early scale were set. Sustaining this growth would soon demand even more capital and risk. The decision to go public in October 2017 changed everything for C Limited. Listing on the New York Stock Exchange brought in $884 million, fresh capital that would turbocharge Shopee's ambitions. For Forrest Lee, ringing the opening bell in New York was more than a symbolic moment. It was the start of a new race, this time on a global stage. Investors from around the world, from Wall Street funds to Asian sovereign wealth, were now betting on C's vision for Southeast Asia. Inside the company, the pressure to deliver intensified. The IPO wasn't just a fundraising event. It was a public promise to keep growing, to out-hustle rivals, and to justify every dollar spent. Shopee's marketing budgets ballooned. Out came the celebrity endorsements. Blackpink in Thailand, Cristiano Ronaldo in Indonesia, local TV stars in Vietnam and the Philippines. Billboards, primetime TV slots, and splashy online campaigns flooded the region. Every major shopping festival, 11/11, 12/12, and Ramadan, became a battleground for attention and market share. But behind the glitzy ads, the grind never stopped. Shopee's staff worked marathon hours, often 7 days a week, racing to launch new features, onboard sellers, and fix bugs before the next big sale. Teams in Singapore, Jakarta, and Ho Chi Minh City traded sleep for market share, driven by an unspoken understanding. The IPO had given them resources, but it had also raised the stakes. Failure was no longer just a personal setback, it would be a public one. Forrest Lee, known for his quiet determination, rarely made grand speeches. Instead, he wrote late-night emails reminding employees that the company's future depended on their willingness to outwork and outthink the competition. With new capital and relentless execution, Shopee's user base soared. More sellers joined, more buyers returned, and the platform's momentum became self-reinforcing. The IPO had opened the door to a new era, but it was the company's culture, restless and ambitious and willing to sacrifice comfort for growth, that powered Shopee's charge to the top.
By early 2019, third-party analytics began to show a new leader in Southeast Asia's e-commerce race. Shopee had pulled ahead of Lazada in regional web traffic and app usage, according to iPrice and similar web data. In Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand, Shopee's mobile-first approach and relentless promotions had tipped the balance. While exact numbers differ across sources, the direction was clear. Shopee's quarterly visits now outpaced Lazada's by tens of millions, a reversal that few industry watchers predicted just a year earlier. Behind this traffic flip was more than clever marketing. Lazada, once the undisputed leader, had become the testing ground for Alibaba's global ambitions. In March 2018, Alibaba boosted its stake in Lazada to 83%, injecting billions and sending a wave of senior executives from Hangzhou. The new leadership, including Alibaba co-founder Lucy Peng as chief executive, brought the playbook that had conquered China's vast market: standardized systems, strict key performance indicators, and a focus on quality over affordability. But Southeast Asia was not China. Former Lazada staff and local merchants described a period of confusion and tension. Decisions and documents arrived in Mandarin. Discount policies were tightened, and the flexibility that once attracted small sellers began to vanish. Many vendors complained that Lazada was becoming less responsive to local needs, while Shopee doubled down on price promotions, local influencers, and gamified shopping festivals. Internally, Lazada's teams faced constant restructuring. Managers cycled in and out, priorities shifted, and morale dipped as the company tried to reconcile Alibaba's centralized control with Southeast Asia's fragmented realities. Shopee, on the other hand, stayed nimble, empowering country teams, refining logistics, and responding quickly to seller feedback. The result was visible in the numbers. By the second quarter of 2019, Shopee was Southeast Asia's most visited online marketplace, while Lazada struggled to regain its footing amid cultural and strategic misalignment. This decisive victory gave Sea Limited the validation and the confidence to think even bigger. In early 2020, the world shut down. Streets emptied, shops closed, and millions turned to their phones for everything: work, entertainment, and shopping. For Sea Limited, the timing could not have been better. Shopee's mobile-first approach and Garena's gaming empire put the company at the intersection of three explosive trends: e-commerce, gaming, and digital payments. Locked indoors, people across Southeast Asia and Latin America downloaded Shopee and Free Fire in record numbers. Governments pumped trillions into the economy, and stimulus checks quickly found their way into online shopping carts and in-game purchases. The user surge was staggering. Free Fire crossed 1 billion downloads, becoming one of the most played games on the planet. Shopee's monthly active users soared as families in Jakarta, Manila, and Sao Paulo embraced online shopping not just as a convenience, but as a necessity. SeaMoney, the company's fintech arm, rode this wave, with payment volumes and loan demand multiplying quarter after quarter. Revenue across all business lines set new records every few months. Investors took notice. See's stock, trading at $12 in 2019, shot to $50 by the start of 2020, and then $200 in January 2021. By November that year, shares peaked near $372, pushing the company's market value above $200 billion. Tencent's early backing gave global funds confidence to pile in, fueling even more momentum. Inside Sea, the mood was euphoric. Forrest Li, who once rented a single room in public housing, now found himself at the helm of Southeast Asia's most valuable tech giant. For a brief moment, he was Singapore's richest man. The company's journey from a cramped shophouse to the top of the stock charts felt like vindication for every risk and every late-night gamble. With so much capital and goodwill, the temptation to reach even higher became impossible to resist. Flush with capital and riding a wave of pandemic-fueled momentum, Sea Limited went all in on growth. Offices filled with new faces as the company launched a hiring spree across every division: engineers, marketers, logistics planners, and regional managers. Recruiters were told to find the best talent, no matter the cost. In 2021 alone, thousands of new employees joined the ranks, swelling headcount to unprecedented levels. Expansion teams mapped out new markets with the confidence of a company that had just conquered Southeast Asia. Shopee Food became the next big bet. The company poured resources into food delivery, hoping to replicate Shopee's e-commerce success. But outside Vietnam, the numbers never added up. In most countries, Shopee Food captured less than 5% of the market, far behind established rivals. Vietnam stood as the exception, where Shopee Food somehow grabbed around 40% share, an outlier that fueled hope, but not enough to offset struggles elsewhere. The unit economics were punishing, with high customer subsidies, fierce competition, and thin margins. Yet the push continued, driven by a belief that scale would eventually bring profits. Geographic ambitions stretched even further. Sea set its sights on Latin America, rolling out Shopee in Brazil, then Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Argentina. The company also entered France and India, determined to become a global contender. Teams worked around the clock, launching localized apps, onboarding sellers, and building logistics from scratch. At headquarters, the mood was electric. Leaders talked openly about becoming the number 2 e-commerce player in every region, convinced that their playbook could work anywhere. But beneath the surface, the pace came at a cost. Resources were spread thin. Local teams faced mounting challenges adapting to unfamiliar markets and consumer habits. The company's cash reserves, once overflowing, began to feel the strain of so many simultaneous bets. For now, though, the focus stayed on growth. Every new hire, every market entry, was a sign that nothing seemed out of reach. Capturing the real story behind Sea Limited's rise and collapse demands more than numbers and headlines. It requires voices from inside the machine. The documentary's interview plan sets out to collect 8 to 10 first-hand accounts, blending executives, operational staff, and independent analysts to map the company's journey from every angle. 4 to 5 of these interviews are slated for on-camera appearances, while others may speak under conditions of anonymity, ensuring candor about sensitive periods like mass layoffs or regulatory setbacks. The core lineup includes a former Garena product lead who can break down how Free Fire's early success funded Shopee's relentless expansion. A Shopee category manager, especially from women's fashion or beauty, will explain how a handful of high-frequency categories powered the platform's growth and how the 80-20 rule shaped every promotion. Regional logistics managers from Indonesia or Vietnam will detail the investments that cut delivery times and built trust with local sellers, critical for Shopee's edge over rivals. To illuminate the chaos of cost-cutting, the plan targets employees who lived through the 2022 austerity wave. Their stories about $30 food limits, vanished perks, and the mood after Forrest Li's no salary pledge bring the internal culture shift to life. An ex-Lazada manager, or Alibaba liaison, will recount the Special Forces era, when waves of Chinese executives tried to impose a one-size-fits-all strategy on a region defined by difference. Regulatory experts will clarify the fallout from India's Free Fire ban and Shopee's abrupt exit, while a fintech analyst will dissect SeaMoney's promise and the investor rollercoaster tied to profitability targets. Finally, a former TikTok shop strategist will unpack how TikTok's hiring spree and content commerce model upended the e-commerce landscape, often by recruiting Shopee's own playbook designers. Each interview is cleared through legal release forms, with options for blurred faces or altered audio for those concerned about professional risk. The goal is 6 to 8 minutes of tightly edited, high-impact testimony, intercut with graphics and archival footage. This approach grounds the story in lived experience, turning headline-making decisions into personal, sometimes painful memories. By weaving together these voices, the documentary builds a credible, nuanced account of how Singapore's largest company soared, stumbled, and now faces an uncertain future. In January 2022, Sea Limited's stock chart took a steep plunge, dropping 60% from its peak in just a matter of weeks. Investors who once celebrated the company's rise were now scrambling for the exits. The reason was not a single misstep, but a sudden global shift in the financial climate. After years of near-zero interest rates and easy money, central banks around the world began raising rates to fight inflation. Tech stocks, especially those burning cash to chase growth, became toxic overnight. Funds that had piled into Sea during the pandemic started dumping shares, rotating into safer bets like bonds and gold. The flood of cheap capital that once fueled Shopee's expansion dried up almost instantly. Sea's cash reserves, once a source of comfort, now looked inadequate against swelling losses and ambitious overseas bets. The company's market value, which had soared to nearly $200 billion just months before, was now in freefall. Tencent, once Sea's most important backer, sold $3 billion worth of shares, sending another shock through the market. For founders and early employees, the mood shifted from celebration to anxiety. Every day brought fresh reminders that the era of easy funding was over. Forrest Lee, who had always preached the importance of discipline, now faced a harsher reality. Without cheap capital, every decision would be scrutinized, every gamble second-guessed. The capital squeeze exposed just how vulnerable even the region's largest tech giant could be when the tide turned. Investors no longer wanted stories of growth at any cost. They wanted proof that Sea could survive on its own. On February 14, 2022, Indian regulators issued a sweeping ban that abruptly removed Garena Free Fire from app stores across the country. For Sea Limited, this was more than a regulatory headache, it was a direct blow to the company's most reliable cash engine. Free Fire had crossed 1 billion downloads globally, and India was its largest market by far. Overnight, Garena lost access to more than 40 million active players in India, accounting for roughly a quarter of Free Fire's global user base. The financial impact was immediate and severe. Sea Limited's stock dropped 18% in a single day, erasing $16 billion in market value. The ban did not just cut off revenue from in-app purchases and esports events, it also shattered the growth narrative that had justified years of aggressive expansion. Garena's operations team scrambled to respond, but there was no playbook for a loss of this scale. Support channels flooded with complaints. Tournament organizers were left in limbo. Local partners saw contracts suspended or cancelled overnight. With one government order, a market that had taken years to build was gone. The sudden absence of Indian players left a hole in Garena's global active user count and a gap in Sea Limited's quarterly revenue that no other region could fill. Inside headquarters, the mood shifted from confidence to crisis. The loss of Indian Free Fire revenue forced the company to rethink its entire spending plan for the year. Expansion budgets were slashed. New hires were frozen. The shock from India set off a chain reaction that would soon reach every corner of Sea Limited's business. Shopee's global retreat began quietly, with notices to vendors and partners in France, India, and across Latin America. In March 2022, teams in Paris and Mumbai received word that operations would wind down immediately. Months of effort, local hiring, warehouse leases, onboarding sellers were erased in a single week. The exits did not stop there. Shopee shut down in Mexico, Colombia, Chile, and Argentina, pulling out of markets where it had barely begun to make a dent. For thousands of employees, the message was blunt. The era of endless expansion was over. Inside headquarters, the atmosphere changed almost overnight. The company cut about 7,000 jobs in just 6 months, roughly 1 out of every 10 employees. People who had joined during the boom now faced daily uncertainty, watching colleagues pack up their desks and HR emails arrive without warning. Managers began tracking spending with a level of scrutiny no one had seen before. Lunch budgets were capped at $30 a day. Free dinners vanished. Even the ice cream, once a symbol of Shopee's startup culture, disappeared from office freezers. The cost-cutting extended beyond perks. Salary freezes hit every level of the company. Bonuses, once promised as a reward for long hours, were postponed or cancelled. In a public memo, Forrest Lee announced he would forego his own salary, hoping to signal that sacrifice started at the top. But for many inside, the gesture did little to lift morale. The relentless focus on efficiency replaced the optimism that had defined Shopee's rise. Conversations in the hallways shifted from new product launches to rumors of which team might be next. The sense of belonging that once fueled late nights and big dreams gave way to anxiety and self-preservation. The company that had defined itself by ambition was now learning the cost of survival. TikTok Shop did not just enter the Southeast Asian e-commerce scene, it detonated it. In Indonesia, TikTok Shop vaulted from almost zero to controlling about 3/4 of the country's social commerce market in just 2 years, according to official figures. Its strategy was simple and ruthless. Turn every viral video into a shopping event, then let the algorithm do the selling. Instead of relying on search bars and static product listings, TikTok's feed served up live streams, flash discounts, and influencer pitches tuned to each viewer's habits. The result? Shoppers scrolled, watched, and bought, often without ever leaving the app. That growth came with a hunger for experienced operators. Recruiters across Singapore, Jakarta, and Ho Chi Minh City began offering Shopee's managers and marketers 20 to 50% pay bumps, plus stock options and promises of creative freedom. LinkedIn profiles quickly filled with familiar names, category leads, campaign strategists, even logistics planners, jumping from C's orange to TikTok's black. In exit interviews, Shopee managers started hearing the same story. People were leaving for bigger paychecks or for a shot at building the next big thing inside TikTok. The battlefield had shifted. Shopee's playbook was now in the hands of its most aggressive new rival, and the competition was algorithmic, relentless, and personal. C Limited posted its first GAAP profit in the fourth quarter of 2022. For the first time, the company's financial filings showed black ink instead of red. It was an outcome that would have seemed impossible during the worst days of layoffs and cost-cutting. Net income for the full year 2023 reached $162.7 million, a dramatic reversal from years of heavy losses. The news brought a brief sense of relief to investors who had watched the stock lose more than 90% of its value since the peak. But the mood on Wall Street remained cautious. While C was clawing its way back to profitability, other e-commerce giants were already rebounding. Mercado Libre, the Latin American marketplace often compared to C, saw its stock climb over 40% in 2023. C's shares, by contrast, stayed stuck near multi-year lows. Analysts pored over each earnings report looking for signs that the turnaround could last. The company's return to profit was a necessary step, but the question lingered. Was this a true recovery, or just a pause in a much longer cycle of rise and fall? Cycles define every company's destiny, especially in Southeast Asia's tech arena. Sea Limited's rise and reversal offer a hard-won lesson in discipline. Market leadership can vanish in a single market cycle if ambition outruns focus. The decision to expand rapidly, to chase every new vertical, and to trust that capital would always be available, left the company exposed when the tide turned. Shopee's success was built on understanding local needs and staying ruthlessly efficient, but that edge dulled as growth became the only goal. Even now, Sea Limited remains the region's e-commerce leader. The cost of overreach is clear. Survival depends on knowing when to push and when to pull back. The story is not just about winning once, it is about staying disciplined through every high and low, because in business, the next cycle is always on the horizon. Today, Sea Limited remains Southeast Asia's e-commerce giant. Yet its $200 billion collapse is a warning investors cannot ignore. Tech fortunes shift faster than regulation or strategy can adapt. As TikTok, inflation, and new market cycles reshape the landscape, no empire is safe from disruption. In a world where dominance vanishes in months, the only certainty is that tomorrow's winners are never guaranteed. Share your thoughts below. Where do you see the next giant rising or falling?